This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is flyer number 187, entitled Masculism is Political. Description. This flyer complains that both Sandman and the newer Howard Dare do not devote enough time and energy to talking about how to change the gender status quo that is so detrimental to men. They both paint a vivid picture of the gender injustices to men, but say almost nothing about how to change the gender climate and the gender laws so that they're fairer to men. Now the flyer itself. Masculism is political. I have the same complaint of you, Howard Dare, as I have of Sandman. That is, both of you paint a vivid picture of the gender status quo, but neither of you says much about how to change it. To change the gender status quo, you need to be masculist and put enormous moral pressure on women to FIP up, that is, become FIPs. Financially independent persons, by getting a career-competent education at high school and university, so that a woman can earn a decent wage as an adult and not parasite off a man, as do fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to parasite off the money of a man. Fluffies, based on the word fluff, that is, light, not serious, not responsible, not adult, not career competent, not FIP, are the enemies of the masculists. The main political goal of the masculists is to wipe out man-slavery across the planet this century by wiping out the fluffies, not by killing them, but by ignoring them to death so that they rot on the shelf to extinction, so that their fluffy genes are wiped from the gene pool. Women who don't bother to become FIPs don't get a man. Be FIP or be manless is one of the favourite sayings of the masculists to women. No calculus, no baby is a similar saying. Men are the superior sex. We have won 99% of the Science Nobel Prizes and all the major math prizes. We have an average IQ superiority over women by about 4 IQ points. We have a 10% higher IQ variance over women, so that the morons and the genii are males, so it's not surprising that men win the Nobels. We have much higher testosterone levels than women, so are more aggressive, more ambitious, more dogged, more persistent, so achieve far more. Men dominate the who's who book entries. Men need to arm themselves intellectually with masculist ideas, so that we can hit back at the feminazi bitches who are now indirectly wiping out whole populations due to their takeover of the divorce courts, imposing their hypocritical, fluffy feminist values onto them, causing about one married father in four, to be financially massacred, losing his kids with 90% probability, losing his house that goes to his fluffy ex-wife so she can raise her kids in it. He will pay child support to kids he barely sees, and often will pay alimony to his fluffy ex-wife so that she can continue to parasite off him after the divorce the way she did before the divorce. These fluffy feminist hypocrites have to be stopped because they have become genociders. 2/3 of young men under 35 in many major countries, for example US, Japan, Germany, etc., refuse to marry, refuse to have kids, and spend their money on themselves, all as a result of the toxicity of the divorce courts, which are fluffy feminist in policy. That is, they see men as the enemy, to be abused, and since these fluffy feminists are still fluffies, that is, they have not had their masculist consciousness raised, so by default see men traditionally, that is, as cash machines. They combine the two attitudes of feminism, men the enemy to be abused, and fluffy, men as cash machines, in financially massacring men in a divorce. The casualty rate amongst men in the divorce courts is far worse than in a major war. So war needs to be declared against fluffy feminism and the divorce courts, the gynocentric media, the gynocentric primary school system, etc. Otherwise, the population continues to be wiped out. Do the math. If only a third of the young generation reproduces its number, then over a century, say 4 generations, that's a third of a third of a third of a third, which is about 1%. And the other 99% has died off. This is what the fluffy feminists are doing indirectly and have to be stopped. If you hear a fluffy feminist making misandrous statements against men, then give the bitch a real dose of masculinist hatred and blow it away. We men are smarter and more aggressive than women and can harangue women better than they can harangue us, so blow them away. Put the fear of God into them, that feminazi bitches are the most hated category of female and the first to be rejected by men. Soon, artificial wombs and sex bots will be with us, causing feminism to disappear overnight as men grow their own kids and prefer to sex their bots than women. These sex bots will have film star faces, luscious curvy bodies, creamy grippy vaginas that women cannot compete with. Women will be forced to be very nice to men. Otherwise, they will not be competitive with the bots and the artworms. Men's time is coming, only a decade or so away, so women reading this, take note. Women have 10 billion fewer neurons in their brains, so it's not surprising that they have greater difficulty seeing the bigger picture, looking ahead to the political consequences of their actions. Men are better at this than women because our brains have 10% more neurons. Women have child minds to most men and are only tolerated because women provide sex to men, which causes men's frontal lobes to switch off, which contain the critical thinking and planning regions of the brain. To the men reading this, raise your masculinist consciousness and then get out there and fight the fluffy feminists. Educate society that if the current gender status quo continues, our population gets wiped out. Fluffy feminists are genociders and hence the greatest criminals of our historical era. They have to be stopped. They have to be wiped out, not by killing them, but by being totally ignored. Women's fear of being manless will force them to become nice. Then they might get a man to pay attention to them. The gender laws need to be changed. Alimony needs to be thrown out. Custody of kids in a divorce needs to be made joint by default. The owner of a house needs to keep it. The paternity rejection right needs to be legislated, which would allow men to legally reject paternity the way women can reject an unwanted pregnancy, aka abortion right. The lack of a para is one of the most blatant examples of sexual discrimination against men that exists and ruins millions of men's lives. The fluffy feminists will fight the para with everything they have because the passage of the para will force women to be fips, which terrifies fluffies, who would then be forced to become responsible adults, taking responsibility for their own lives. Masculism thus forces women to grow up. Tell your male friends about the core ideas of masculism. Let them see the light, so that when they snarl at fluffy feminist hypocrites, who on the one hand want equal rights for women, but reject equal obligations for women, that is, sharing equally the burden of earning a living by bothering to get a fit-based, career-competent education, they show their sharp masculinist canines which bite. Women have had a near monopoly on gender issues for half a century. Not anymore. Now masculists are lashing back at fluffy feminazi hypocrites and putting enormous moral pressure on women to fip up or be punished by being manless. Across the Western world now, men are waking up to the toxicity of the feminazi bitches, the fluffy feminist hypocrisy, and are fighting back. Men are smarter and more aggressive than women, so once we get angry enough, of course, we will win. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Ciao.